unquote, leads the human consciousness towards the divinity, divine consciousness. And yeah, so it's a very, very, like sort of, an unfamiliar path in the Western societies, but it's not that different from what people follow. But it's just, just a profound sort of path. If you once we start to look into it, hopefully you'll agree with me. I mean, obviously some people might not, and I can understand that, but it's just my effort to explain what this is, and hopefully we can benefit something from it. Okay, so without further ado, I'll just start with the next slide. Right, I mean, okay, first things first here. Now, they see in everywhere really, not even Western societies. I mean, the general consensus really of the definition of quote unquote love is primarily, it's more like a primal instinct, so it's the thing, isn't it? It's like just more of an animalistic instinct that human beings tend to have, right? So first of all, we've got, and I've just got a picture here. It's got from the internet, all these stuff. It's just more of an animalistic instinct, really, for them. For instance, male or female doesn't matter. I mean, this guy, if you just consider this falling in love for the first time, and his heart's like, oh, okay, blah blah blah, and then this woman's also, fluttered or whatever, etc. This is a typical romance sort of thing you learn from TVs, media, and all sorts of other places, really. And it's just the way, say, you're a teenager and you look at an attractive woman for the first time, your heart starts to palpitate, sort of thing. You don't seem to understand the mechanism, what's going on, really. And then, that's the sort of the culmination, really, the end point of that stage. If you're successful, really, and if you think that's your ideal viewpoint, so he's probably dreaming of this situation already at that particular point. But just the normal consensus, really, of the definition of quote unquote love is very, very limited, really, because it just doesn't. They don't seem to. There's no sort of an understanding, of a higher truth, a higher quote unquote love sort of thing. There's only limited perception that's been, sort of understood by humanity, really, over time. And the religious and a couple of religious people, they quote unquote have this quote unquote concept of love for God, but it's just their understanding and their practices are quite limited from what I can see. I mean, you could defer, you could say probably not, but that's just what I understand from what I've seen so far, and it's just the way the human consciousness has led to so far. So it's more, and then these days it's gone from more to this to actually more to demonic, really. I mean, everything these days is just from quote unquote less, from more than just more romantic sort of behavior, but moving towards the more demonic side. It's more lust than anything these days, everywhere. From the I guess proliferation of the media engines like internet, and TV advertisements, etc., and pornography, all these junk, really, of the society and Western society has sort of plagued the whole planet, really, through the mass communications, etc. So the average consciousness is really more demonic. Why am I saying demonic? Now, again, there's other videos I have about how demonic, why lust is demonic as opposed to love. And this concept here, I mean, I don't want to go into the whole detail of what lust is. Lust, if you just briefly go through it, lust is just just examine yourself, and when you're in lust and your temptations, you will notice that your actual behavior is demonic. And I mean, you might not agree with me, but it's just a matter of looking at yourself carefully, because what happens is that we're all in the moments of lust or temptations, we don't see ourselves who we really are, because we already sort of quote unquote delved into that state of sensual gratification. And until that gratification comes to that point, we don't see it. And until once we're essentially gratified, then then only we can come back to our normal senses. It's like a it's like a curve, really. And if I drew a curve, you'll see that there's a point of climax. Until that point of climax, you can't think properly, and that's the demonic side. But that that state of demonicism, really, of the humanity, it's just increasing over and over because of all this garbage that there is. And even this stuff. So I mean, I don't want to go into that aspect. I mean, let's just keep the lust aside for maybe another topic. You guys don't have much time for that. But even this guy here, I mean, you might think, I mean, typical humanity would think, okay, this guy is a lover, okay, he's a romantic guy, okay, and this woman's thinking, yeah, he's into, he brought me all these box of chocolates or whatever, flowers, etc. And but the truth is, the average consciousness of these individuals, if you look into the average consciousness, the way their thoughts are, they're not really pure. Pure is something completely different. Purity and this quote-unquote love of humanity, we understand today, is completely different. And I'm going to explain how that works. And bhakti is really the transformation of an average consciousness, like an individual like this who's just blinded to this temptation or desire, but to move on from that and escalate, to a higher consciousness. So it's about, transforming the individual towards purity or higher self, right? And then obviously some religions do have that sort of emphasis, but in the terms of practice, not many do, It's just very, very few people have that sort of a practice, and we'll go through that more carefully. So what I'm trying to say is that this reality that we associate with does not necessarily mean that we're happy. What happens is that you get married and then you get kids or whatever, then you're still always bonded. You're always having issues. And then people start to divorce, which is another great problem of humanity. Okay? So there's always issues. It's just an illusion sort of thing. But I'm just going to go through that more carefully, properly. But the people, again, the problem with it is that once people are not quote-unquote spiritual, they have no understanding really of the definition of marriage and how spiritually it benefits us. But that's another topic in itself. All right. So this concept, just going through this concept, is that this is just more of an quote-unquote illusion, really. I mean, just you think that this is illusory happiness, really. It's never going to keep you happy. I mean, how many people are actually happy? The marriage couples, you'll see that they're not, because they were just driven by this initial infatuation or initial temptation of lustful desires or whatever it is. And that's all that there is to it. And there's a whole raft of differences between this woman and this woman. They're not bonded in terms of their mental or physical, whatever, mental attributes, etc. Anyway, so there's no harmony, quote-unquote harmony there, from what I can see. Okay, you could disagree with me, but this is the way it is. But yet humanity is just stuck with this because they can't get out of the cycle. Now, the next point obviously is that how can you get out of the cycle? I mean, this is the average quote-unquote human consciousness here, I say. I mean, all these things here. I mean, I don't want to go through the names, but yeah, I mean, sleep is okay, sleep, sex, or whatever, food, donuts, beer, TV, advertisements, media, do's, don't, order, that sort of thing, family time, etc. This is the average mind of a human man, for instance. And a woman probably similar, it's not that different actually. She's got some other things like jewelry, makeup, and etc. I don't know. Physical sort of, people tend to have basically all these things are just called quote-unquote known as attachments, mortal attachments. Why are they attachments? Because they tend to cling yourself. If you look and examine yourself within, you'll see that everything that you're doing in your material lives or whatever it is, you're clinging yourself to it. You're getting attached. And what's the problem with attachment is that you see that it's suffering because everything your desires are never fulfilled, right? Think about it this. Everything you desire, say you desire for quote-unquote sex or whatever, your food or whatever, these things are always there, like if you think about it this way, they never seem to go away. You think it's okay, you have it great, today is fine. The next day, what? The desires keep on increasing. There is no quote-unquote end to it. And it just becomes a part of life. And and then it's just you think it's part of life and people just accept it as part of life, etc. But if you feed into more of this lustful temptations, it just increases, if you notice that. If you quote unquote didn't work and you started to indulge in these things, you become, you'll see how bad you become. You're demonic. The worse and worse you get. But fortunately, we do work these days, and the more we spend time in doing things, except being attached to other things, we tend to get our lives better, and it's the path. But that's not the complete path. The complete path to actually get rid of, quote unquote, get rid of all this rubbish or garbage that's sort of plaguing the human mind is the path known as vairagya, or detachment. And bhakti, true bhakti, in order to attain that true, quote unquote, bhakti stage, one without practicing this path, detachment or vairagya, you cannot attain anything. So this is like the preliminary stage. And people think that, okay, they just worship, an idol or whatever, a god, or Hindus, and probably you'll see that they do worship gods and goddesses. There's a meaning to it, and probably, but that's not the actual bhakti there. The bhakti begins really through detachment, okay, vairagya. Until you detach yourself from all this garbage, no matter what you have what you try to do and try to display to other public, it has no meaning. You might worship a god, you might think that god or goddess is going to give you some power over something else, and it's just mortal delusion, really, because it's giving you nothing, really. It's just because I'm trying to explain that bhakti is actually a human transformation. So it's a transformation on how this fellow here can transform into a more peaceful, or whatever, his mind is less clutter. And then only once your mind is out of clutter, then only you can awaken what is known as the spiritual heart. Okay, in the Western society, they've got all these different yogi, Western yoga practitioners. What they don't understand is that they cannot attain this spiritual awakening, a spiritual heart awakening, unless they've been attached with all this stuff. And very, very few people actually, even whatever they call them, quote unquote, call them yoga certificationers, yoga practitioners, and yoga masters, whatever they give their titles these days. It's all about a business for them, really, and they can't even get out the basic instincts like lust, without getting out of that. And you see all these women and whatever, I don't want to quote people's names, it's wrong, but many young people, old people, doesn't matter, they're attached to it, and they depict that when they even do those programs, and it's disgusting, really, when I see it. That the yoga practitioners, etc., they tend to depict their bodily images in these yoga, in these holy practices like yoga, in terms of improving their health, but their own mindset is just full of delusion. Okay, and then therefore they can never awaken this, and they get just bonded by this stuff regardless. There's hardly very, very few people who understand that. It's that yoga is just not about an exercise, really. It is far more to it. If yoga, these exercises are there to assist the body to awaken that, but to assist the body, the first thing first is about the mind, and to get your mind to a higher state, you need to practice the mental purification path known as detachment of vairagya. Until you practice that, and it's a constant path, really. Everything is constant. See, it's always ongoing. You work when you go to work, when you don't go to work, when you're free time, when you're not free time. You always should be practicing this path known as vairagya, detachment. Having sensual objects around is not a good thing either. Just living a simple life is very important, and getting rid of garbage is very important. It's less simplistic. Truth, simplicity, and love. Then only through truth, simplicity, you can attain this thing called, quote unquote, real love, which is known as the bhakti path, or the element of bhakti. The main essence of bhakti. But we'll see and look into that in much more detail later on. Yeah. So as I was saying, just what is bhakti really? It's about transformation, just like a flower, the blossoming of a flower. Really, it's just that you'll see that you quote unquote this flower has been bonded, really. It's not been able to awaken, but it has this potential to become this beautiful flower. But if you don't feed the right nutrients and nutrition, it probably would never get to this stage. And if you don't have water, this and that, and that's the idea, is that we provide the mind with the right information and give it the right strength and etc. to slowly awaken its true potential. And this could be done through various mediums. We'll see into that more, like meditation and all these things are there, chanting. Probably these things will help you to get there. But without detachment, there's no way you can actually progress. Okay, and that's the path, really, the preliminary stage. Okay, should I say? And then you'll awaken and you will notice the difference yourself. Your soul will notice the difference, which means that the one within you. It's not about really outside anything, about some external higher God or anything, but it's the internal self awaken, and realize the difference really, and actually experience and understand that, hey, lust is actually wrong, or these negative thoughts shouldn't be there in my mind, then that sort of thing, and you understand that is actually the evil, that is the demonic side of humanity. Instead of finding this quote-unquote demon that exists somewhere else, it's about identifying the own demons within and fighting those own demons and purifying your thoughts and actions to become quote-unquote like divine. That's the idea. It's the divinization of humanity through bhakti. And I guess, many religions quote-unquote have that concept of love, but the practice isn't there, and the understanding towards leading to that higher consciousness isn't really there, And this is why I've got these slides here, so that people, regardless of the background, Hinduism, Buddhism, etc., to awaken the stage and understand that, feel that difference. And this, once you're fully awakened, just like a fruit, just like a flower, once you feed all the good stuff to you, and what happens is that in order to attain a fruit, you have to, there has to be a strong root, and it takes years of effort, and it always does, because any drastic transformation within a human consciousness takes time. It's not an immediate click and go, right? It'll take time, but in the end you will reap the fruits. And what is the fruit? It is there is an actual stage, quote unquote, known as the bliss or samadhi. The samadhi is a stage of great human transformation where one actually, quote unquote, can experience the greater happiness in material lives, and it's known as the bliss. People call it the bliss of God, whatever it is, but it is actually experienced right within, on this planet, right within yourself, through various stages like meditation or chanting, etc. It doesn't matter, but it's the culmination. Well, it's in the end, once you get rid of all your garbage, you actually can experience it. And I have experienced it, and that's why I'm here. It's not something that it doesn't exist anywhere. It is right here, and it is right within us. Okay, this is really the teachings of all the sort of texts, religious texts. I'm not a really big fan of all texts, because problem is that some religions might have this different vision, perception that their texts are better than this. Some are actually much better than the others. It's true, but I cannot sort of say go and read these texts and then just give you and if you're some other religion and you have this negative vibe, that's not a good. So I'm not going to promote any quote unquote books or texts or etc. But the idea is to transform from here all the way to this stage, and this is the path, and this is where you actually can experience quote unquote this bliss, perfection, this bliss, this great happiness that you never knew could exist in the human consciousness. And I have experienced it myself, not to a greater level, but just one or a few times, just minor things. But I have experienced that stage where it is unbelievable. Like the bliss is a stage that comes from the heart. It's like an awakening, it's just something that moved within me. And then I was awakened, and there was this euphoric state that you cannot explain this. And once that was happening, and it happens for me in stages of meditation, happened to me once a couple of times, and it happened to me in chants, but not many times, a few times only. But there are people who quote unquote have greater experiences of bliss, and this is the stage, quote unquote, stage of the divine, that people need to understand that. So yeah, that's the point that I'm trying to make here. Okay. Now, yeah, this is the typical worship really in Hinduism, I guess, contemporary Hinduism. You got idol worship here, and people have this there are benefits to it. I'm not saying it's wrong. Okay, I'm not saying this is a wrong path. Just like any other prayer, there is a there's a prayer here, but in fact, I guess there's a reason of these clothes and these colors is to purify the mind. These things, these colors and all these things are actually there to actually help you to appreciate the beautiful nature sort of thing, the creation and how beautiful it is. So you see, it's actually not a bad path. I mean, in terms of you worship some deity, etc. It's for an average person, really. So for an average Joe who's not really keen in spirituality, they do some worship generally, and there's only very few actually have this connection. I mean, and in other religious traditions, this is more Hinduism, but in Christianity, etc., they probably pray without a sort of a deity, but it doesn't really matter, like it's about the consciousness, and we'll see what will take you to that path. But this is not a bad way to worship actually. If you can do it, that's fine. But we'll look into the actual meaning of bhakti. Okay, so people chant some mantras and do some worship, and that's the air to it. I mean, that's not a bad thing, but there's nothing higher that's leading towards it, and we need to see that higher stage rather than just appreciating some deity or worship, etc. And because this is quote unquote known as the the lower levels of bhakti, and this is not really bhakti, all right. Okay, next slide. Okay, now true bhakti is actually to quote unquote once you get into a higher stage of divinity, divine consciousness, you'll understand that to appreciate the divine, you can appreciate not just in one form. People worship, like for instance, Jesus is as in a crucifixion form, but that's fine. But the true understanding of bhakti, really, the element of bhakti, is to see the divine, quote unquote, the divine, in not just one form, but in many forms. And that's the great blessings of Sanatana Dharma. Really, is about to see the divine and worship and appreciate the divine in almost every way, really. And that's why we've got this evolution, really. You can worship the divine as a child. Here is a baby Krishna and Mother Yashoda, and you can see that concept developed in the West as well over time with the concept of baby Jesus and Mother Mary. But this is a very, very strong many Hindus believe in this path. And obviously you got gods with thousands of heads or whatever, arms, etc. And you could worship the god as an elephant-headed or four-headed man, or even as a woman. See, and even as a demonic woman or whatever. Even so, she's control over all the temptations, lusts, and desires, and she's a ruler. And even half man, half woman. So what I'm trying to tell you is that I have actually myself. I mean, I'm just not going to give another example there. I'll just go give my own example, because I do follow the path of bhakti. A little bit, but over time I've come to realize that it's great to have these emotions developed, when you worship the divine in the form of a child, for instance. People don't understand that. It's a great path when you try to actually connect with the divine emotionally, as opposed to having a picture, then try to get your emotions out, get your feelings out. That's the most important in bhakti, because there's no end to it, but it's the starting point of appreciating the divine in different forms, and and having those appreciations. So I've worshipped the divine in the form of a female as well, and it's brilliant. So, and as a Kali is just another form of who's in control of a very fierce female who has control over all the negative things, so people shouldn't do wrong things. So that, I have quote unquote practiced divine in terms of a man, a woman, even I've worshipped divine in terms of an elephant sort of thing headed. But the idea is that the more you quote unquote worship, then your mind is quote unquote sort of filled with all this divine consciousness, and you feel different, you feel positive, you'll attain this higher state of consciousness. People do not understand what bhakti is. That's the problem, because they just it's especially for people who even practice whatever practice they do, but they have no understanding to that. And especially when you worship the divine as a child, you see that element bhakti coming out, And what this is not only the pathway. The more you actually get into this bhakti path, the path of the transformation through quote unquote this emotional development really of humanity, you will see that you'll find the divine in almost anything. There is no limitation to it. I guess obviously this kid is here worshipping the cow because this is a tradition there, and the cow is worshipped. The reason why the cow is worshipped as all gods because it provides milk, it provides everything, and provides all these good things like the cow dung, etc. Anything that the cow has can be used, right? But people, and then so they worship the cow as a divine, and that's the reason it's worshipped as divine. It's because, there's hardly very few people, having that connection with the animal as opposed to making the animal. We only people in the West actually have kill these animals, innocent animals, for pleasures of the flesh, which is quote unquote known as demonic, right? That's what I'm trying to explain to you, is that any innocent animal, for no reason, if you consume the flesh, or you kill or whatever that you do, these are quote unquote opposite of what bhakti is. These are quote unquote known as demonic. Okay. And not only that, any birds or etc. Like for instance, I would go and feed the birds, etc. Right. The more you connect with these animals and worship them as the divine, you will see an awakening within. That's what's happening because you're transforming yourself. And I do practice this, and this is brilliant, is that I do not really go and worship temples as such, but I go in open fields. I feed my pigeons, for instance, every week, but they're just wild pigeons, for instance, just an example. But there's a great connection that's developed over time, you see, with me and the pigeons, for instance, just an example. Just as much as this guy has worshipped, has connection with this child is worshipping the cow, for instance. And that's the thing. That's the beauty of the bhakti, is that you quote unquote this love, whatever you have, is something that will spread throughout. Okay, it'll go from one end and it will never stop. This concept of love is always profound. It just keeps flowing, and it's just the way love works in the universe. It's a positive emotion, and this is what true love is. Really, is that it's about transformation. Once you transform yourself and detach from these temptations, you will start to see the divine and you worship the divine almost any part of creation. You're connecting with nature and becoming one with all. And until you attain that state, until you see the divine in everything, you haven't really progressed to that stage of bhakti, because you were just in the preliminary stage. And then, so these are very important. Even if you practice, strict austerities, until and unless you can get out of that ego zone, human ego, saying that my God is better and I'm going to worship him in this form only, like Vishnu or Krishna or whatever people do, like Shiva, whatever. Or like if you say Jesus or whatever, you got all these different names, Allah, whatever. Until you get out of that concept zone and try to see the true picture of the real way, quote unquote, say God wanted us to see the world, then there is only limited progress really of humanity, human consciousness. And until you get out of that zone and worship, quote unquote, like worship the cow as a divine, as see in every form of God or whatever, then you move, you escalate to the next stage of bhakti, and then the escalation keeps going on to there's an ultimate point of known as quote unquote self-realization, which we'll go through that later. Okay, now I've got this slide here. It says brahmacharya, and why this has got to link with bhakti was that you cannot practice people don't understand this, right? But in order to practice true bhakti, you need to practice obviously that path that I told you before is known as vairagya, detachment. And one of the most important important parts of detachment is this path known as brahmacharya. Okay, what is it? Brahmacharya, as it says, means the control of the senses in thought, word, and deed. And it's one of the strongest proponents, really, of brahmacharya is, I guess, few other guys like Swami Vivekananda, but probably people have heard of Gandhi, he's probably one of the most greatest proponents of brahmacharya, from what I understand, in the West, and not in the West, everywhere really. And what does it mean? I mean, brahmacharya is the idea is here. It shows in the picture again. Truth is God, so it's about awakening again, to awaken that, purify, to understand the true essence, really awaken the natural state by the sublimation, as opposed to as control. Actually, I mean, control, in the beginning you'll need to do the control part, but it's the actually sublimation of all the negative thoughts, so it's not about senses as such. I mean, it's probably not the right term I'd use, but basically the sublimation of the negative thoughts and negative things that we tend to associate with. First of all, identifying those things and continuously practicing that path of detachment that I said. That's brahmacharya. That's what it means. It's actually going, say, basically, first of all, it would mean, this path of celibacy. All right. So it would mean to detach from lust. But the idea, as I said, is the first thing is to actually work on the mind. Okay, for instance, as here picture, now this is the average teenage Joe, and he sees another female, his mind is blah blah blah, just as I showed before, so he's probably hot as qualification. But most of the time these days it's about pure lust, really. He's got this insatiable desire to have relations with her, and there's a cross here saying no. So that point, so any time you have these temptations, the idea to detach from them and detach from these thoughts and making an effort is known as brahmacharya. It's not an easy path. Brahmacharya is not really an easy path, but it is important. Until one practices celibacy, or that path where you're controlling your urges, these urges to become demonic, quote unquote, then only you can awaken, really. Then only you're practicing true bhakti. Okay, until you're practicing brahmacharya at some level, you're not really you're not practicing bhakti at all. Okay, the bhakti begins really when you practice the element of when you're serious about your path and you want to actually purify yourself. You could be married and practice brahmacharya as well. There's no, you don't have to be, doesn't mean that you detach from the world, but without restraint, moral restraint, and etc., restraint of the senses in thought, word, and deed, in action as well. Mostly, first of all, it's action. The beginning stages will be action. The more you indulge in other things, in things that you think is right, it leads, and that it has no end to this desire. This is probably the basic teachings of Buddhism as well. It's all the same, really, all religions. It's that people in Christianity, they say lust is a sin, for instance, and etc. Everywhere in Judaism, etc. But that's the idea behind it. The idea is to detach, really. So even if you were married, you would detach from sexual activities or all sexual practices, etc. You sleep separately. That's the basic concept of brahmacharya. Is that, and not only that, is that you'd restrain from any sort of behavior. I'm just going to go a bit more detailed, probably not so much, but even your masturbation practices, everything has to be stopped and controlled, because when you experience difficult stages, but without that difficult stage, there is no progress. Think about it this way: if you want to purify yourself, any major change requires an effort. And if people believe in something, I don't like the concept of belief anymore, because they say that you believe in this God, it will lead you to freedom. Well, that is just a blind belief, isn't it? And that's what most of the major religions today teach. You believe in us, we will deliver you. That's the basic concept. And that is just, to me, that just is blind belief. Therefore, I don't believe in all these, I'm not a great believer, really, of that sort of a, behavior mindset. So it's not just about a matter of blind belief that can deliver you, but it's the matter of your actual practice, how much practice you do. Just as you do any work, to achieve anything, you need, like, and even at work, to achieve, you see great people at work, whatever, any field, science, religion, etc. To get to a higher state, you will see that everyone has worked hard, even businessmen, etc. So it's the same here in spirituality. If you don't make any progress, you can't benefit anything. But the benefit of spirituality is that if you practice these things will actually help you in your modern day life as well. So to become any great, like, leader or, a businessman, etc., they would be practicing these sort of, things at a small level, at least. Without any practice of brahmacharya, even on any level, you cannot achieve any greatness in the material life as well. Because anything material life requires sacrifice, doesn't it? To become something great, you will need to do some sacrifice. It's just the way it is. You can't say, even wherever you are, anybody who's done a great study or etc., he's made some sacrifice to his personal desires. Until he's done that, he wouldn't have been able to attain that high position in a job, or whatever it is, in a business, made lots of money. It doesn't work like that naturally. It requires some sort of an effort, and this is a high path, really. And it's known as a golden path, and it is really the high path towards spiritual realization as well. And it's practiced by all these great leaders as well, and they know, and their lives are a testimony of how it's shaped them, how important it is. So yeah, this is a preliminary stage of brahmacharya, mastering the physical, and then work on the mental at the same time, so that you actually notice how demonic your thoughts are when you're lusting. And for instance, I myself, came to realize that. And it doesn't mean that you're not married, but even if you're married, after you're married, you restrain from all sorts of desires, and slowly by slowly you work on it. Okay, work on it with a partner. That's even better, because if your partner does not work with you, it's even worse, isn't it? So, yeah. And that's the most difficult part of brahmacharya, is to actually detach from lust, because lust is such a great problem today. It is growing and growing and growing. Just detachment of lust, even great, spiritual masters actually struggle and they fail. So this is a very difficult part. But how can you actually fight this temptation? And therefore you need to go to that next stage, which is also preliminary of bhakti, is the path of surrender. That is why we surrender, because it is not. Generally, we are quote-unquote limited with our ability. If you just think, okay, I'm going to detach from this lust, and you're great attached to females, for instance, these guys are attached. It's not possible generally, and therefore this is absolutely essential these days. It's known as surrender. Surrender is absolutely the most critical, really. Surrender to the divine or whatever. What does it mean? Okay, what's going on? First of all, is that every human being has an ego attached with them. Okay, whether you like it or not, it's known as ahankara. What it means is that our ego determines really what our actions are, and etc. And if we cannot, you'll notice that everyone has an ego. Even if no matter how high your spiritual development is, you have an ego. And the idea is to detach from that ego and get out of that ego zone. And therefore, when you surrender completely to God, you're actually surrendering your quote-unquote ego and going this and removing your ego from your mind or from your heart, from the evils. Ego is the evil, really. Ego is like the black energy sort of thing that's surrounding you. Think about it that way. If you had quote-unquote, divine energy within you, as representative of God or whatever, and then what's the rest is covering is the black energy, and that's your material attachments, your delusions, etc. And once you quote-unquote truly surrender to God, the idea of prayer is actually surrender, okay, to the highest. But again, there's less understanding there. Once you truly surrender, you actually, you surrender to something higher than you and say, okay, I forgive me, please, and take. And I am sinful. I'm not going to do this again. So if you sinned before, you've accumulated all this garbage and you want to get out of it, so you surrender, and slowly by slowly your ego and your all this thing will slowly go away, because you realize that you actually not, you're not the supreme person that you think you are. And people always have this issue, and nobody really how religious you are. Every religious person has this ego, is that they think their religion is better, and then they promote and they do all these great efforts to think that that's the best way to do it, right? And what happens is that Yeah, they do all that and they make great effort and they think they're happy. But what they don't understand is that they're not they're just increasing their ego, quote unquote. As opposed to decreasing one's ego, you're accumulating more garbage and more negative energy. Because once you understand that the divine is within all and everything, then there's no need, so for that, monolithic conception really, and that sort of thing, and assist humanity in the positive sense, and that'll only help humanity in the long run, I guess. So, and then and there's a lot of benefits of ego, removal of ego. Just that you realize that, like for instance, if you're a woman and you've dressed provocatively all your life, sorry, you've got this great ego within you, thinking that you're better than others, and etc. And that creates bondage and suffering, and etc. Everything, and then it's just demonic, and then these concepts are known as hellish, and etc. These concept of hell, heaven, and hell is the human mindset really, and if you don't transform your mindset, you might just become a demonic, because that's who you really are at the stage, this lifetime. And once you die, who knows? It probably that sort of lifestyle will take you there. Okay, I'm not going to go into the more afterlives because people do not understand it, and I can understand that. But if you don't transform your mindset now, that's who you really become even when you die. And if you don't make an effort, well, tough luck. Then you just become demonic, and more and more. So surrender is the first path, and the true stage of the transformation of the individual, and the first path of bhakti. And this is quote unquote where God assists you as well. I mean, I'm not going to go into the what's God and what is God, etc. But again, this is not, again, people who don't believe in God and think their God is different. So therefore, I'm not going to talk about God as such in bhakti. But the idea is you always need to surrender. So the idea of prayer is actually surrender, okay? And people just think that when they pray, they probably have very less understanding of that. But they keep making mistakes, and that's not the path again. Once you understand and realize your mistakes and you surrender, then you do not do the same mistakes again. Like, for instance, basic things like eating meat, etc. So that's the idea. And say another thing about bhakti, right, is about this path of vegetarianism. I would say mostly, probably the highest would be eating raw vegetables and fruits. Veganism probably is higher. But yeah, the idea of pure vegetarianism here, obviously, is referring to lacto-vegetarianism or veganism, or proponents of veganism, raw veganism, etc. Anything like that. And what is this doing really is that this is an absolutely essential component of bhakti. Meaning that you can't practice bhakti if you're, so for instance, in a non-vegetarian diet, or in a very spicy diet, for instance, in a diet that's full of, lots of chili, etc. Lots of things that's temptations, but why am I saying this? Okay, now the reason is that once you start to practice bhakti and you want to awaken the divine love or whatever within you, as you know, it's a transformation of the human consciousness and the human body as well. The human consciousness is limited because it's linked with the body, and if your body, if you feed wrong things in the body, because you know that we are what we eat, and it's the same thing with the consciousness, because the consciousness of your mind is actually limited to how the body is as well. It's connected, right, isn't it? If you don't have a healthy body, you cannot have a healthy mind, for instance, and that's the idea. Is that, and the same thing is that if you wanted to purify your consciousness, if you feed yourself with garbage, or for instance, non-vegetarian diet as well, it will limit your consciousness. And because there's certain elements of fruits and vegetables that promote a better mindset, and that is another key proponent of Sanatana Dharma. Okay, is that fruits and vegetables particularly have there's some element to it. You'll see the difference, and I'm actually a practical person here. So if you don't believe me, you just see it for yourself. You don't have to change whatever your belief systems are. But if you transform into vegetarianism, you will see that your consciousness is different. It will be less See, once you fill yourself with for instance, if you're having fish, etc., on a regular basis, your meat products, they're promoting this concept of lust within you a lot more. And especially when you have lots of spicy foods, even if you're vegetarian, but if you indulge in lots of spicy foods, chili and all this stuff, they're actually increasing. Like for instance, we all know that chili, for instance, right, increases helps to regulate the blood flow and in the brain, etc. But they don't realize that it's all promoting all these other genitals as well. It's promoting blood flow, etc. We know that. It's same thing. It's people haven't less understood is that what does that have an effect on the human consciousness? People don't question that, but that's the whole idea. Is that all these food, if you eat, incorrect food, they promote all these negative desires, and therefore you're not able to practice the bhakti, because your mind is filled with, for instance, lust, of other temptations, other anger, etc. It promotes everything because they are quote unquote linked with each other, really. So food is absolutely essential. If you wanted to transform your mindset, you need to transform your food habits. So without that, you cannot really attain that higher stage. So if you were born in a very poor country where you didn't have enough food and enough to eat, I'd be very sorry, but there probably would be something I could help you there. But if you have food, like in a Western society, where you have ample food and you choose the wrong foods, you're only creating more garbage and more bondage and etc. When you have enough fruits and vegetables and you have plant-full stuff, and there's no reason for you to transform, it's just quote unquote like a sin, because you can't progress in the spiritual dimension. It is the absolute essential to find the beauty of fruits and vegetables is also bhakti, because to find the divine really in fruits and vegetables, because you can worship, you can also worship fruits and vegetables. They are quote unquote divine as well. Anything is divine, but the idea is that there is in nature there is a component known as sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic, and the sattvic is the path of purity and goodness, right? And if you consume the components that are only pure for goodness and nothing to do with the violence, okay, because here there's no non-violence attached to anything, so there's only happiness sort of thing, and that's that flows within you as well. So if you eat something that's been having is in pain and suffering, like an animal being killed, that effect, karmic effect, will come into your place, and you cannot attain a bhakti stage. Okay, so this is a preliminary stage, as I was saying. And the benefits actually is that the more raw you eat, the better it is. But the most difficult part is that detachment really from the desires of the taste. That's a difficult part. Just part of that vairagya really. So just as you would need to detach from lust and things like that, it's to find the higher truth and higher taste really in food by practicing vegetarianism. Okay. So any religion or any philosophy that practices these things like brahmacharya, etc., are actually real spiritual truths. And one of the highest I've seen, from what I understand, highest proponents of bhakti is from the Hare Krishna community, obviously in the West, and it's played a tremendous role, which is excellent. But yeah, so that's the idea is that any path that you follow, doesn't matter in any sort of belief system of God, but your idea is that once you've followed this path, regardless of what your belief systems are, then you'll see that bhakti progress within you, and it's independent of any sort of divine being, etc. like that. And yeah, so another path towards bhakti is the actual practice. Okay, so once we have all those preliminary setups, then we can start doing at the same time we can do these practices. Now what this says is that there's one component here. In path of bhakti, again, there's other yogic practices also, like Raja Yoga, where you have, I guess, a different sort of a practice. But in bhakti, it's a bit simpler, because it's more to do with the emotional aspect, and it's for emotional beings, So people to awaken that emotion, that's what it is. That's a bhakti, to awaken that emotion within you and purify and find the divine within yourself and transform yourself. So in bhakti, it's no real restriction of certain practices, like in yoga. In certain parts of yoga, you'd have to do strict austere practices, because it has a lot of this. It's very complicated in that sense, but there's another divine path really. But in bhakti, what will happen is that you would, either way, you'd either do a chanting path or you'd take the path of meditation. In the chanting, what you do is you'd chant a deity's name. So chant a particular mantra. What is mantra? Mantra means, man means the mind, and tra means having control. So basically, mantra can actually have the specific syllables have an effect on the mind, so that you can actually sort of control the mind. That's what it is. So the more you recite or these mantras, either verbally or mentally, it has an effect on the mind. So that's why we use those mantras. Okay, and the more you chant, the more the mind gets purified. Like, the common mantra is probably, it's not that difficult. You can just recite one or two. And it's very simple. One is called Om Namah Shivaya, for instance. It's a popular one, Om Namah Shivaya. It's such a very, very, very powerful mantra, because it's been recited in India for many, many decades, and it's a holy sort of name of the God. And then you've also got Hare Krishna mantras, for instance. It's very popularized in Western society. It's very effective. So any of these mantras really, once you practice them, or once you chant them on a regular basis, you will notice the divine energy working within yourself. And that's the idea, is that you pick a particular mantra and you stick with it, because that the more you recite that mantra, it just generates that energy vibe. And if you change with different names, the energy vibe isn't there. So you just pick one mantra, what suits you best and what path you pick best, and then from that path you worship that particular divine only. So just the idea is that you worship one particular path. It just makes things easier. If you have 20,000 divine beings, then it's hard to worship. But if you had one particular divine being, then it makes you connect to one. But then you can also, it's a way however you want to see it. You can worship, if you have the ability then to see divine in everything, that's even brilliant. But you generally picture a divine, whatever, consciousness, etc., and you start to chant, and you will see the difference. And I can tell you, I have seen the difference. I have chanted. You've got to. The way to actually make this work is that it's just a very quick path to awaken your spirituality, because once you chant fully, like continuously for hours, give it 110% until you get tired. So you chant for 1, 2, 3 hours, etc. Go on like that, and then you close your eyes and you keep chanting until you get tired. It's a possibility that if your practices were all pure in your lifestyle, eventually you'll see that you will experience this, greater consciousness coming within you. And I have experienced that. I have experienced divinity sort of within myself, and this euphoric, this bliss state, and this whole transformation of this hands, and my hands were vibrating completely, and I was just, I couldn't chant anymore. I could just feel that divine presence coming within me, and in bliss as well at the same time. So that's what leads to, once you do sincere chanting. So you can choose that path. The other path, obviously, which I think is actually it might be more difficult because it requires a bit of effort, but this is a quote-unquote really, really divine path. And it's known as the meditation on God. There's two types, right? So meditation on God involves Saguna meditation. The two types. One is known as Saguna meditation, the other one is the Nirguna meditation. And the Saguna meditation, as is shown in this picture of the great yogi, is that he's seeing the divine in a physical form, within the heart or wherever. And that's one of the best really ways to meditate in terms of for the bhakti path, and that's for anybody. So you don't have to do anything, you can start meditating straight away. Is that you try to picture either physical form. For the Saguna meditation, you'd have either physical form, anything like that, within. Now, that's a great component of Saguna meditation. You think about the divine in the mind, wherever it is, in the heart, in the mind, and you would purify your consciousness, So, but in order to do this, you have to practice all the preliminary stages, because without that, you can't. Your mind is not purified yet, So it's not when you start to practice all the vegetarianism, detachments, etc., material detachments, and you start to practice this, you'll see an elevation within yourself, in a higher consciousness. You'll see better meditation and better meditation. Eventually, this type of meditation will eventually lead you to quote unquote what's known as samadhi, which is the state of bliss, and it is And then eventually what happens is that this path will take you to that next stage known as quote unquote enlightenment, from the bhakti area. There's other parts, but I'm just focusing on bhakti at the moment. Is that eventually, not only that, you'll see that once you see the divine in everything, and you've practiced the divine path everywhere, and you've done lots of austerities and on, that transformation starts to take place rapidly, okay? And once the flower fully blossoms, and what you realize is that the divine is actually right within yourself, okay? And that's the irony, is that you will notice that you become quote unquote like a divine being, as opposed to a divine being outside, out there, completely outside. The transformation has happened right within, and your thoughts are purified, your mind is purified, and you feel you're not filled with garbage, and your spiritual heart is awakened. Okay, that's the most important. Once your spiritual heart is awakened, you'll see that the bliss will flow over you. And people have all these different names on the samadhi, bhava samadhi, all these etc. These great saints have experienced, and that's what it is. They're experiencing that state of quote unquote God within, and that is quote unquote what's known as the freedom, really, from the material bondage or suffering, because this is the real state of who we are. Okay, whatever you believe in, it doesn't matter. And all this material garbage has brought negative energy around you, and once we remove all that negative stuff, we'll find God just right within us. And there's there are different ways to meditate. So I said Soguna meditation. The Nirguna meditation is involving involving. It's a bit more difficult, because people who cannot see God as particular form and object, they can meditate God on the form of symbol Om. Like you close your eyes and you meditate and you just chant Om, so that sort of thing. Or the other thing you could do, what I found is brilliant in this Nirguna meditation, is you close your eyes, you plug in your headphones, right, and you listen to. This is a using of technology to get where we want to be, and it's a brilliant part. It's one of the quickest, really best techniques, I think, from what I understand, for bhakti meditation, is that you listen to any sort of a divine chant, any sort of bhakti divine chants, or any sort of a divine music, really, rhythms of a divine. It could be Krishna, it could be Shiva, etc. But there are some tunes that actually have these divine vibrations, and you can think of the divine when you listen to them. And if you listen to those things and you start to meditate, your mind itself becomes purified, you see, and your heart becomes purified as well. And it's not about listening to nature sounds in particular, but I'm saying particularly divine chants, regardless of whatever it is, Hindu chants, Vedic chants, etc., or even other chants, but particularly even Krishna chants. It's brilliant, is because it depends on what sort of flutes or whatever these tunes is, that it doesn't have to be a verbal chant as such, but as I say, any instrumental sounds that have a divine sort of quality invoked in them, particularly. Then what happens is that once you listen to those things, and there's been even chants, Vedic chants, etc., or mantra chants, that it just gives you that divine awakening. If you listen to it and you meditate, and you close your eyes, you meditate, you don't focus on any particular object or such, but you just listen to those sounds, and you focus, and your mind is completely focused on the sounds itself and nothing else. And then you start to experience it. It's about, again, the same thing. You will slowly gradually see the development of the spiritual heart and the spiritual mindset and everything, and you just feel more quote unquote divine and free, really. You're free from all this garbage. And what's the beauty is that eventually what you will see, this is a very, very high state. This is obviously a picture of a Hindu god Shiva, but that's not the point. Is that he's a human. Looking at a human here. He's just like one of us, really. Consider that, right? As a human being. But he's in tears, right? So that's a very, very high state of bhakti, because in meditation he's attained that state of blissful state of freedom, that he's in tears, the tears of joy. These are not tears of suffering. These are really tears of joy, and this is one of the highest states of meditation, of highest samadhi. Once you reach that highest state, you'll see that, and this third eye really means you've awakened your true self, sort of thing, a higher truth. that there is something beyond this life, the spiritual dimensions, etc. That happens only when you have this pure heart, and that's once you have a pure heart and you see that love flowing through you, divine love, and that's what it is. And it's a great state of bhakti. People do not understand this, but this is the whole idea of how human beings should, reach to. This is the goal we should end up to. This is a complete, transformation, and this is the enlightenment, really, the great enlightenment, which is obviously quote unquote hidden. People do not understand, the teachings of the Buddha, but the teachings are to transform your consciousness to reach there. His parts, probably his teachings were focused on the meditation component, but regardless, in one way or the other, without practicing any of the preliminary steps, so that's shown as brahmacharya, etc., all these things, there is no awakening of the spiritual heart. And once your spiritual heart is awakened to, as I said, meditation and all these different things that we've done, and having this appreciation, love for all, then only you can awaken your true state. And then once you awaken your true state, you will become quote unquote enlightened. That's the real enlightenment. It's known as self-realization, it's known as God realization, etc. And what happens is that once you attain that state, you quote unquote become free. And people who believe in this concept of reincarnation, they will know that state will mean that you do not come back on this planet to be reborn. I mean, those who don't believe, that's okay, but the idea is to practice this thing, bhakti, in the real dimension, in this life and now, and just do it, and that sort of thing. And then once you do that, you'll know the difference. So hope we all, practice something, hopefully. If you have any questions, let me know. My website is dharmaonline.net, obviously, and just give me an email or anything like that, rahul@dharmaonline.net. So hopefully you enjoy it. Thank you all very much. So God bless. Okay, bye.